Life doesn't come with a reset button, but recovery, that's a full time job. Today, we're joined by a physiotherapist who understands that healing isn't just physical, it's personal, persistent, and deeply human. Whether you're a survivor, a caregiver, or somewhere in between, this episode is for you, and it starts in just a few seconds.
Love and laughter lead the way through the darkest, hardest days. Hope still burns, it won't retire. This is me, my life rewired. I was broken, now I'm whole. Wrote new chapters for my soul. Not the end, just re-inspired. This is me, my life rewired.
Today, we are joined by Gloria Gilbert. Gloria, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Rob. Glad to be here.
I was contacted by Teresa Sims, and she gave me a very good recommendation to have you on the program. So I'm so thankful to have you on today. You are a physiotherapist,
Yes, I am.
and does what you do, does that relate to all types of injuries, or just brain injury, or are you specialized in any of those
Well,
areas?
yes, it does. I probably should tell you a little bit about how long I've been a physiotherapist because
Yes.
it will put into context the idea that really the word brain injury wasn't really talked about as part of potentially trauma. I graduated in the 60s, which is a long time ago, and I'm still licensed as a physiotherapist. I love what I'm doing. And worked with children and adults for many years until I decided, truthfully, when I was working at the hospital in London, that I needed more time to spend with my patients. But at the same time, the government decided to stop funding outpatient physiotherapy. So
Mm,
suddenly I became a business owner, all right, which
yeah.
was not part of the plan.
Hmm.
So when I think about the type of people I saw, they were people who were not necessarily being managed well at the hospital because nobody was looking at long-term problems. And so I must admit, we learned on the spot. We
Yeah.
learned by talking to people and about what their concerns were. And for a long time, I wasn't, I was trained as half OTPT, although I wasn't able to call myself a POT graduate because I didn't do enough hours of OT. But nonetheless, you look at function all the time. And so over time, very quickly over time, even though I was a solo practitioner, the clinic became somewhat of a quasi multidisciplinary treatment center. I had an MEd in counseling, I had an OT, we had massage therapists, and eventually kinesiologist. So we were all very much at a learning stage about what else is going on. All right.
Yeah.
So, and I think that when I look back on all the people I treated, especially those with trauma, many of my referrals came from lawyers and insurance companies because it was like, I don't know what else to do with this person. Gloria, figure
Yeah.
out what's going on. And that was literally the question. Many of them trusted me to figure out what was going on. And of
Yeah.
course, unfortunately, many car accident people were sort of labeled as they're not working hard enough, they're looking for $1 million
Hmm.
settlement, et cetera, which of course was totally wrong. And so even long time ago in the 80s, Rob, I started talking about delayed recovery post trauma. What is going on with the patient? Because in the clinic, we had to literally deal with the head or brain problems
Yeah.
separately from the from the body problems. And of course, that's not the way it's handled now, but this was a good way of learning what symptoms can be controlled by traditional physiotherapy methods, including a lot of education, and what else are we missing? So we really did learn a great deal, but we also had the luxury of being able to talk to patients for as long as needed. It was my clinic, so I wasn't worried about pushing people through. And
Right. Getting
that
them in and
is
out the door. Yeah.
that's right. And that is, you really do have to sit and talk to people and listen to what their problems are.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. So, say whenever you got a patient that would come into the clinic, back then you really didn't know that they had a brain injury. You just knew that they were in a car accident or whatever may have happened. Was there ever concern at the get go that this person's probably has some type of a brain injury, or is it something you just kind of figured out along the way?
I don't know if those were the words we were using then until people started talking about vision. And I went to a lecture with a well known neurooptometrist, William Padula from Pennsylvania, who literally wrote the book on vision problems post trauma. And then it was like an aha moment for my staff and myself. Yes, there's something else going on that we don't know anything about. Or a patient that would come in and say, I'm feeling okay, but I'm really dizzy because the windshield wipers in the car made me
Mm,
dizzy. It was
yeah.
something that was outside the box of what a physiotherapist at that time was really paying attention to.
Hmm.
But
So
again,
once you made those connections, how hard was it to connect with the insurance companies and say this person has a disability because of a brain injury? They need therapies. Was that a challenge for you to get the insurance to
physiotherapy
pay?
cannot, physiotherapists cannot diagnose brain injuries. You can say that they have symptoms suggestive of. And
Hmm.
again, given that we're at this learning curve, we were able to find an ophthalmologist in Windsor. So my patients went from London to Windsor. We had an optometrist outside Toronto, people who were starting to look at all of this. And in the clinic, we were doing a lot of experimenting with treatment programs, etc. But I don't
Yeah.
think the word brain injury really came into vogue until the last 10 years or so, that you think of it as post trauma. So
Yeah.
even when I'm just going to digress for a moment because I did a master's many years post graduating in 1966. Not a good idea. Not a good idea. Don't stay out of school for 30 years before you go to graduate school. But the reason was that I was still in the field. I had to learn how to read journal articles. I had to understand research. And of course, in the 60s, we didn't have that. So, in retrospect, of course, it was important. But I remember one of my projects was looking for people who had ongoing neck pain post trauma. This was one
Mm.
of the courses. And I couldn't do anything as far as treatment is concerned, but I would document them. And I found a fair number of people with dizziness symptoms or people who were literally concerned about moving, spatial problems that had not been picked up years later. And even if they did have a physician that would listen to them now, they probably wouldn't even have the vocabulary to talk to their physician so much about what happens. They had accommodated to some extent, so they no longer did certain things and they just concentrated on other things. So it's a dilemma because you really need to be a very good listener, and of course having any type of traumatic injury is traumatic. It's challenging, and we have to look at
Right.
all the other reasons why somebody could feel overwhelmed or worried or anxious, whether they can work or not work. I mean, there's so many variables to think about. But now, of course, we have a much better way of assessing people who've had likely have had traumatic brain injury as well.
I imagine it's probably an industry standard that you use to assess now.
Well, I'm no longer treating patients. I mean, I'm educating, I'm mentoring. So I can't tell you I have been actively involved with working with brain injury patients alone. I'm aware of the services available. I work closely with physiotherapists at New Physio London who are dealing with brain injury. So we've all been on a learning curve. I mean, there are not too many of us who are still licensed at this age, but I think it's that I love what I'm doing, and there's still a lot of questions that have to be answered. But for years, I must admit, with psychologists, with other physios, with an ophthalmologist, I was doing these little workshops, which were really education seminars about what are we missing here? And now we have a different language that we're talking about. But it was really, I, my concern right now is that sometimes patients are diagnosed with a brain injury and they're only managed for their brain injury.
Hmm.
And most people who've had some type of traumatic reason for having a brain injury, which is probably most people, are likely to have some physical problems as well. And of
Right.
course, their life has changed dramatically since the
Hmm.
brain injury. And a solo practitioner doesn't always have the time to address that, nor sometimes the inclination. They're just happy the patient has survived and is moving forward. So
Yeah.
still have some concerns, yes.
Yeah. Oftentimes the patient is left basically alone to navigate it themselves and figure out what kind of treatment they need. And they could have different doctors they have to go to. Like you were saying with vision, that would be something that they would have to get taken care of. And then speech and rehab, cognitive rehab,
That's right.
which,
Right.
that would be two different ball games there.
Right. And as a practitioner who was looking at these types of problems, I was aware of coordinating with speech language people and vision
Hmm.
people, etc. But we were literally all at the learning stage. We
Yeah.
literally were, there was no set formula to do exactly what's going on. So some of the ongoing problems relate to the fact that now, I've worked with several organizations where I will not mention the organizations, although they are listed as resources on my website, which they're great organizations. But I've been trying to present a case of a person who's had a brain injury that was undiagnosed until fairly recently. And it's interesting because they only want to have a patient who just has had a brain injury, and I've been trying to say, I don't think I've ever met a patient who doesn't have any other problems, especially long term,
Yeah.
except brain injury. So I think I'm going to have to do it myself. And that's one of the reasons why I'm still concerned about a practitioner maybe not being able to treat everything, but to at least figure out what's going on, refer on, explain to the patient what's happening, be a
Yeah.
good educator. And you and I know there are good resources out there now for people with brain injury. So
Hmm.
link them with those organizations at a time when it could be very beneficial for them. Because
Right.
most people think they're getting a little crazy, that
Hmm.
they really are.
You made a
Hmm.
good point too about the providers referring patients on. A lot of the providers are getting a lot better now about noticing that, okay, my patient has a brain injury. Years ago, it was, you probably should have some rehabilitation therapies,
Right. And
but
that's
now they recognize patient has vision problems, patient has speech problems, and they're getting better on knowing where to send the patient whenever this happens. And that's why, you know, when I did a book launch at the beginning of this year, and I had people that were so not on board with, why do I want to spread awareness? I don't have a brain injury. It doesn't make sense to. But then I think back to the number of people that I've talked to along my journey, and they're like, yeah, I was in a bad car wreck a few years ago, and I have constant migraines, and I just find myself in a fog and I don't know what I'm thinking. Buddy, you have a brain injury, don't even realize it. No one ever told you. So that's why awareness is so important.
it is. And even though we could say auto insurers and lawyers are certainly there are a lot more information and they
Mhm.
would follow it up. It's not 100%,
Right.
and I think that the person who sustained the problem has to educate themselves as best they can and
Yeah.
come into their lawyer or their healthcare person with a list of some of the concerns that they have, that it doesn't seem to be getting any better. I mean,
Hmm.
we have to be prepared to deal with that. The one thing that I have learned over the years, about doing an intake history is that years ago you would say, "How were you the day before the accident?" And you would get some information and you would have a patient fill out their form. Well, in retrospect, how useful is that? Not very useful.
Right.
So, over the years, I learned with my staff to say, when were you fine? When were you okay? Now, that could have been as a child, as a teen, or maybe never. Maybe you had some congenital problem you were brought with. But did you ever recover from that problem? Were you able to go back and do all the things that you did before that problem? What
Mm-hmm.
kind of help did you get? So you can see where I'm coming from because you're looking at people's ability to change, the resilience they have, the supports they may have. So it's way beyond just the physical trauma of what's going on. And of course, as I course through this, going through little case studies, it makes more sense about why some people would have so much more difficulty than others because of their own family support system, work support system, intelligence, education, whatever it is. There's no absolutes. That's what makes it interesting, and that's why I've never been bored a day in my life being a physiotherapist because nobody's the same. I've never had the same problem.
Yeah.
So, it's sort of sometimes I wonder with some of my colleagues, even when they refer to people as another back problem or another neck problem, and I'm looking and rolling my eyes. I don't think it happens as much as it did in my day, but it's still, something that says every person has to be treated totally distinctly from the next person. And
Very
there's
true.
elements that are the same, but nobody has the same background as anybody else, right?
Yeah. The phrase is often thrown out freely. We're all in the same boat. Well, no, not really.
No.
We're all in the same water.
Yes,
Our
yes.
boats come in different shapes and sizes. So that's how
Well,
I like to describe
well,
it.
one funny thing that not well, I shouldn't say funny. Interesting thing is that I've been around long enough that when people who know a lot, whether they're doctors or science people or whatever, they have a problem themselves, and I have seen them in the clinic. I have learned to say, could you please forget everything that you know? You are now a patient, okay, and you
Hmm.
need to assimilate the information a little differently because many of us have a lot more resources at times. If I'm in the operating room and I've had a head injury or a neck injury, an anything injury, I have residents who can take over for me in the operating room. The patient will never know. I may have a spouse at home who can do all the things that I used to do, or help, or hopefully not.
Hmm.
So there's so many things that you need to get to the person at where they can understand what's going on, and you
Right.
have to be realistic about how much change they can really accommodate to
Hmm.
because some people just cannot. It may be cultural, it may be psychological, but there's no absolutes in this business. And
Hmm.
that's what still makes it very interesting to deal with. So I should
Absolutely.
add, though, that I had a head injury as well. And it took me many years to realize the effect of the head injury,
Hmm.
even though it was actually a very severe head injury. I was hit by a car when I was 15. And then the car knocked me to the ground, rolled over my head,
Oh, wow.
pulled up my ear. So I was in hospital, thank goodness, unconscious for 7 days. And and then, I mean, I obviously recovered enough to get back to school, but never had any rehabilitation services. So I have
Right.
an accident in July, and in September, go back to high school, all right, with ongoing headaches, etc.
Yeah.
So the good news is that I was still able to get to McGill and become a physiotherapist. But the bad news is, or the unfortunate news, I shouldn't say bad news because we didn't know, is that my hand eye coordination was really quite compromised. My
Mm,
eyes don't necessarily do the same thing at the same time. And I
yeah.
wore a heavy bandage on the right side of my head because my head, there's no ear there. So my head was tilted. And so my posture accommodated to that. So over time, physiotherapists are good people because they accommodate to all these changes. They do it.
Yeah.
And then one day you realize, why am I doing this? What is going on with this? So it's interesting because I was always able to accommodate in the clinic, because if I had to close one eye to measure something, I would always tell another physiotherapist to do the measurement to be exact. I never played any hand sports. I swam, I did floor exercises. I would never pick up a badminton racket or a tennis racket because I just couldn't coordinate things. I didn't even try. It's almost like my brain told me I can't do that. So hopefully that wouldn't happen nowadays. But who knows? I mean, in those days, the people were happy the patient survived. It was very bad trauma. They were happy I survived and
Mhm.
get on with things. And then again, as a young person, I remember consciously not wanting to scare my parents that I was still having headaches or having some problems. So I wouldn't talk about it.
Yeah.
So, and again, it may have worked for me because emotionally, psychologically, was a pretty healthy person, but it would not necessarily work for everyone to do that. So when I started to put all the pieces together, Rob, I realized that my own learning curve really told me a great deal. And why did it take me so long to be able to diagnose a brain injury on someone else? Because I was never diagnosed with a brain injury, not
True.
per se, not per se. So,
Yeah.
and of course, immediately you can always tell if somebody has no sense of smell, definite sign, traumatic brain injury. That doesn't mean to say everyone doesn't have a sense of smell.
True.
But,
True.
but not having a sense of smell is likely due to a brain injury if you've had
Mhm.
trauma. If you've had trauma. So it's been a very interesting learning curve. And I think that this may take a whole other session at some point, because now that we're all getting older, all right, all those normal changes of things, muscles change, muscles get weaker, ligaments get stiffer, bones
Yeah.
get less dense. They impact all of us, whether you
Mhm.
have had a brain injury or not. So
Correct.
we all have to be very aware of what our body is telling us to do and to be diligent about giving ourselves time to do it.
Yeah. Before we close, what good advice would you give someone that even suspects they could possibly have a brain injury, or maybe they don't even suspect it, but they think, gee, I'm just not feeling my best self? What advice would you give to them, and
Well,
how
I
would
mean,
they go about finding a good
well, if,
physiotherapist?
if they are computer literate and if they can go onto online resources, there are certainly lots of sites that will give you information, and you could say, hmm, I think that may be me, or may some of the Ontario Neurotrauma Foundation, the brain injury associations. I mean, you don't have to have a brain injury to look at their websites,
Right.
and do that. And to ask questions and to really look at how was I before and what am I having problems with now? And is there another reason for that? I
Hmm.
have created a website. I did this years ago and I've just updated it, called Don't Go to the Ouch. That's because everybody's ouch is different. There's no such thing as pain is not pain is not pain.
Right.
Um, I have a big problem with those words, chronic pain, because they're used as a diagnosis rather than as a symptom of a problem, whether it's a back, a neck, something else. That's a whole other issue that many of us are dealing with. And I am a member of many of the pain organizations and brain injury organizations. But I think that what I have tried to do with my website is talk about a feeling that you do not like. You don't know how to explain it. So maybe your provider and you are using the word pain, but maybe it's another word. And so I would encourage people to look at the website. It's an education site. Brain injury is listed as one of the special topics there, but all the other material can be used appropriately for anything. The special topics is just to give people an example of how you use that. So the key, of course, is education, is understanding what's going on. And I encourage people to not use the word pain or ouch, but describe what you're feeling. Give yourself physical words, give yourself emotional words. Do you have other words? And that's where things like nausea, lightheadedness, off balance, clumsy come in, which are not physical and emotional words. They're other words. So they may lead you onto a path that says, I got to look at something else, And so we're talking about all the elements that hopefully a practitioner, whether they're a fitness person or a health provider, will look at, that the education and understanding how help patients understand how to manage the different sensations and feelings they're getting. And then the key to all of this is take your body with you during the day, meaning that it's not just at 5 o'clock when I finish work. It's applying those practical things throughout the day as best you can. That's not
Yeah.
always so easy, but as best you can.
No, it's
So
not.
education, no, it's not. But education is key. And I think the important thing is look at the brain injury resources. And certainly people can email me for information. I will, give them that. There's no cost to look at the website or to talk to me. That's not a problem. Because the information is there. And then the person who's had the problem is the best person to talk to hopefully they have a family doctor, but to talk to their health provider. All right. And you come into that appointment with some words on a piece of paper that are listing all of the problems that you're experiencing or problems that you're feeling, and you want answers to that. You don't want to
Mhm.
be dismissed. That takes a little bit of assertiveness, but you got to persevere. And sometimes, even in that 10 or 15 minutes that very often family doctors only have to talk to you, you can create an environment where you begin a dialogue of saying there's enough that I have that are concerned to me that I need more investigation. I need to be investigated. I need to be looked at differently. But
Right.
if somebody comes in and says, I'm not feeling good, or I'm dizzy, or I'm whatever, even the physician or doesn't know where to start. So I think we need to give them some key words. So education is
Yes.
the key.
I
Education is
definitely agree with that. That is awesome advice. And the doctor can only treat you for what you're telling them.
right.
So that's great advice. One thing I would suggest to anyone that has a brain injury, even if you don't have a brain injury, this is still good advice. Before you even go to your appointment, write on a piece of paper, list all of your symptoms down,
Mhm.
everything that you're experiencing, even if you think it's something that's not important. It might be something important that you don't realize is important. I know when I went to see my neurologist, we had everything listed out, and that was so helpful to them. And that
Yes,
saves them time as well on trying to scratch their head and recreate the will.
that's correct. That
Yeah.
is, that is. So you have to make a little shopping list before you go talk to your health provider.
Yeah.
You
Very
know,
good advice.
yes,
Also, I will say I looked at your website before we recorded today. It's very well laid out. And I would encourage everyone that's don't go to theouch.com. I'll
correct.
have that linked below as well. So if you want to visit the website, just go below and you click right on it and go
The
to
only
it.
thing I would add to that is that if you're looking at it on your phone, it's going to look a little different than looking at it on your computer. So you
Yeah.
probably know more about techie stuff than I do. So you have to sort of get that drop down menu on the phone, which comes
Yeah.
up very easily, on the computer. But it's going to take time. I wouldn't suggest that anybody is going to get all the answers by quickly looking at it for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
I would ask people who are interested in this to really take it step by step and digest it and look at the information, whether you have a brain injury or not, whether you've had treatment or not, because this is information that could help all of us. Physiotherapists are good about that. But it does seem for some people to be too much information. It doesn't have to be if you take it piece by piece by piece.
Yeah.
Don't look at, there's no conclusion to this. It just goes right across, okay? And certainly it's something that all of us who are getting older, which is everybody, can sort of have to
True.
integrate into what
True.
we're
True.
doing. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Congratulations, you. It's very well laid out. I was very impressed.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Good.
It's been a joy speaking with you today, Gloria. I cannot thank you enough for coming on and being a guest today. I'll give you a second to just kind of close us out and whatever advice you would like to give to our viewers that you feel would be helpful. Now's a great time.
Well, I'm going to close with my pet phrase, which is take your body with you during the day. So you can take your body and your brain with you during the day, meaning that someone who is a good survivor of any problem acknowledges the changes that need to be accommodated to throughout the day. So when people say they don't have time to do this, that, or whatever, that's the starting point of saying, well, instead of taking going to the gym for 40 minutes in between, maybe I could lie down in the staff room and just do a relaxation exercise or something. So there's all these changes that have to happen, and the website does talk about scheduling, which is again trying to think about what do you have to do. And of course, in our case, we have to take care of ourselves. But if
Mhm.
you have other obligations, like you're working, like little children, you can't just start from that. You have to take care of the little children first, all right? But other than that, you try and prioritize yourself to be as top of the list as possible. So working through that scheduling component on the website may seem a little bit crazy at times, but it's possible. It's possible to do that. So that the key is at the end of the day, you want to feel that you're still functioning well. You're not exhausted, you're not overwhelmed, you can't wait for the day to end. You really want to think that if you take pieces during the day so that I feel as functional and as happy and as whatever the end of the day, which is a big task, but it can be done. Takes a little
Mhm.
bit of practice. Okay. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Gloria, it's been an honor and such a privilege to have you on the program today. I thank you so
Thank you.
much. If you would just hang around for just a few moments.
Sure.
Guys, thank you so much for joining us today. I encourage you to visit Gloria's website. If you have questions, comments, or anything that you want to get in contact with Gloria, we will also have her email address listed below in the comments as well for you to get in touch with her. I also want to encourage you to visit our website, myliferewired.com. Every time we come across a resource that we know is helpful to a survivor, we make sure we put that on that website so you do not have to recreate the wheel. And if you'd like to be a guest in the program, there's a contact us button on that website as well. Click that, email us, and we will schedule you to be on the program. It's been a pleasure talking with you, Gloria. We'll
Thank you.
see you guys next week. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
This is me, my life rewired.